will get into our Funding Pathways event. The purpose of this event series is to dive into the many different routes businesses can take to secure funding and help you all understand and decide which path suits you and your business best. We do this by bringing in a panel of our industry professionals. So the first 30 to 40 minutes will be our panel portion with the speakers. And then for the remaining of the hour, founders, you'll have the opportunity to enter breakout rooms with our speakers. And you will at that time get to choose which breakout room you would like to go into. So while you hear our speakers talking, definitely think about like who on the panel might it be best for you to connect with and get a little more, intimate one-on-one time with and ask those further questions. So today we have 3 companies joining us, Wefunder, Slauson & Co., and the Alliance for Southern California Innovation. Thank you all so much for being here. And first off, I'll have you each give a brief introduction of yourselves and the companies you're representing today. Let us know what types of startup and business funding you have experience with, and what types of founders should be reaching out to you. So I'll pass it to Eileen first, and feel free to popcorn off after that.
Hi everyone, I'm Eileen. Happy to be here and excited to talk to everyone. So I'm the platform analyst at Slauson & Co. So Slauson & Co. is a $75 million early stage fund, so mainly pre-seed and seed stage. We're rooted in this idea of promoting economic inclusion. So we invest along 2 verticals, so technologies and softwares for small to medium businesses and culture relevant consumer tech. And our average check size is between 250K to 2 million based on the stage. And we look to lead most of our rounds. A little bit more about me. So I study business administration and global studies with a minor in classics at USC. And I previously interned at Muley, who was actually a grade 110 alum at the Walt Disney Company and a couple other places, and found myself in VC through the HBCU VC and Pledge LA internship, where I was placed at Slauson. So now I am a platform analyst, so I support a bit on the platform side, supporting our portfolio founders, along with some of our investment efforts, such as research and just managing a lot of our cold inbound. So that's a little bit about me and Slauson & Co. And I'll pass it over to Raychel.
Awesome. Thank you, Eileen. And hello, everyone. My name is Raychel Espiritu. I'm the Venture Outreach Manager at the Alliance for SoCal Innovation. We're a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to further accelerate innovation within the region. And also thank you, Maya, for hosting us and having us here today. And really what I oversee is the Venture Pipeline Program. It's a matchmaking program. So I like to call it, it's like the Bachelor for startups, and we help prep you for your first date, right? We're matchmakers. We help connect you to investors at the seed and Series A level. What that means is, if you're raising institutional venture capital, typically 1 million plus, and you're based in SoCal, we'd love to meet with you and connect with you. And my background as well, before joining the Alliance, I was director of community at Mila Capital. It was a pre-seed and seed venture firm investing in hardware. I ran the innovation lab, so it was a full prototyping facility. So I worked with a lot of early stage startups. My background before that is in digital marketing, so 12 plus years of really understanding how to drive traffic through digital channels. And yeah, I think that's it for me. And also, SoCal native, born and raised in LA. So definitely want to meet anyone else that's based in the region. So, and I'll pass it over to you. Is it Ade? I know I asked you before this.
No worries. Hi guys, I'm Ade Akufo-Afol, current head of venture partners over at Wefunder. Wefunder is an equity crowdfunding platform. Think of us as almost the Kickstarter for equity. So if you're a company that's looking to raise capital from your community or individuals like your customer base, we're the platform to do so. Basically bringing everyone into one line of your cap table through SPV. It doesn't matter if you're accredited or unaccredited. Basically, everyone gets grouped into one line of your cap table. Fantastic when you're looking to raise capital later on because it's not messy. Following my background, I'm a British-born, Ghanaian-raised American. I've been in this industry for now, I'd say I'm still early, right? I had my first company ever was an agricultural logistics company based out of West Africa and Ghana, helping smallhold farmers basically sell to larger players like Unilever without I was cutting out the middleman. Basically, we were just doing transporting their goods. They paid us $100 a month, and then they kept the profit on it. From there, started working at a company called Partech. Was a financial controller there for about a year and 6 months. Partech is a sub-Saharan African-based VC firm that goes more for seed stage up, and then recently came over to Wefunder as head of first starting up head of inbound in August 2019, and then now switched over to head of venture partners. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. In terms of the companies we help, basically any company can come onto our platform. If you're looking at early stage ideation, but you have a huge follower base, fantastic. If you have friends and family looking to jump in, also fantastic. We're fully agnostic in terms of stage as well as industry. And so basically, if anyone wants to talk and they're looking to raise anywhere from 50K all the way to 5 million, I'm your guy. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you to the three of you. And we had a few more folks jump in while we were getting intros started. So just a reminder, everyone, you will have the opportunity to enter breakout rooms with each of these three amazing people, or you'll be able to choose one. And so, we have representation from venture capital with Eileen, the equity crowdfunding with Addie, and Rachel here to talk about the programs that help founders continue to develop the business. A lot of great different options here, and definitely a variety. As you can see, there's so many routes to approaching funding and fundraising, or even just finding ways to bring your business to the next level on your journey. And I did just want to mention real quick, feel free to write any questions, attendees, that you may have in the chat. If something comes up while one of the speakers are talking, feel free to write anything. I see we have a question right now. So we will have, thank you, Stephanie, for a question. We will have the remainder, probably like the second half of the hour, for you to connect with the speakers in the breakout rooms. And let's say, this has happened before. Let's say you enter the breakout rooms with, Eileen from Slauson & Co. and you're there for 10 minutes, get your questions answered, get to exchange contact. You can feel free to come back to the main room and I can switch you to another breakout room if that's helpful. But there will be a set amount of time on the break rooms for the second half of the hour. Cool, thank you. Okay, so let me kick it off with the first question. For our speakers, I wanted to know, where does one start to find funding when you're in the beginning development stage of starting your business? And how can a founder like that decide on what funding route is best for them? So what type of aspects of their business should they kind of be paying attention to, whether that be their business model, the industry they're in, as to what's going to work best to kind of start their fundraising journey. Speakers, feel free to just unmute and jump in and take the floor when you're ready.
I'll start, I guess. I was going to say, Ade, I think this would be one for you to talk a little bit, but I'll just share. So I think depending on the vertical or what industry you're in will really determine where you can get some early stage, whether it's funding. There's also SBIR grants, right? I mean, that's a huge thing, especially if it's in technology, life science, biotech. In those particular verticals, there's a lot of resources that are available to you, and it's simply a matter of finding them and applying to them. And then once you secure that funding, it's non-dilutive, which means you don't have to pay it back. It doesn't count as anything else. Like, it's money for you to keep, essentially, to get your business off the ground. But if you're building something that's maybe like consumer, right, or it's technology, I mean, there's so many great resources out there. Just my opinion is you try to not take as much money in the beginning as possible. Just build as much as you can with your own resources, right? There's all these great no-code solutions, right? Just kind of build a basic working prototype first and foremost. Or if it's a consumer product, right, just try to build something together and get it out there and get it testing before you start to take any money. That's my 2 cents. I'll see what the panel thinks.
1,000%, I would agree with you on that one. It's always good to say test it out first, then from there look at the free resources. There's always someone looking to help out, right? It can either be anywhere from small grants for terms of ideation. It can also be matching grants. I think for us, again, I was in upstate New York for a very long time, so we always looked at different larger institutions that were opening and giving ignition grants, where it's like if you're a startup that's currently in this area, you're going to be creating jobs in this area, they'll go ahead and match you up to a 25K grant if you hit specific notes, right? So basically looking for free grants, SBIRs, like Rachel said, for anything that's dealing with either energy, military, or bio, anything at all. Pretty much you're able to get free grants in different phases as well, from phase 1 to phase 2. Just has to be specific to that industry. And of course, after that, and you've already like proven out the idea, definitely tapping into the friends, family, and unfortunately fools category. And that's where you're able to kind of get a little bit more funding when it comes to individuals who've either liked your idea, from like early stage consumers who've tried your product, individuals you've done a beta with, wanting to basically invest into your idea. That's where platforms like ours can basically help pull it in. By the end of the day, it's kind of testing it out through different phases to make sure that you do have a solid idea and you actually want to move forward with it. And at that point in time, looking for your first round of funding.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what both of them said. I would say hold off on dilutive funding for as long as possible while you build out what you want your prototype to be. And I feel like in terms of non-dilutive capital, they mentioned grants, SBIR, lots of other things, but I think other programs like accelerators like Grid 110, and small plug for our friends and family program that Slauson & Co. and Grid are co-hosting. Like those, we have a 20K non-dilutive grant for the 20 companies that are accepted into the accelerator. And I know a lot of other accelerators have similar programs that offer non-dilutive cash grants. Also like pitch competitions, crowdfunding, etc., are all very good options for non-dilutive capitals, just so you can be capital efficient at the beginning before you really take it a step further and see like what kind of funding pathways are best for you, because VC is not for everyone. VC is very sexy, I feel like, but it's not usually the most common way that you can get capital. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you. This was an awesome kind of synopsis. I mean, bottom line, as each of our speakers have iterated, great to kind of hold off on the dilutive capital to begin with, especially when you're starting out your fundraising journey. Kind of try to bootstrap and find grants and talk to, everyone in your network to kind of see who's there and who's offering help, because more than likely, if you do that digging, it will be there, and then kind of see what type of traction you have with that and go from there. And also, yes, thank you to Rachel for dropping that resource in the chat. Everyone should definitely check that out for finding grants and sort of things like that. That is super helpful. Thank you. And my next question was submitted by one of our founders, and it's about defining traction. So the founder says, how do you define traction? A challenge I have is that investors all seem to define traction very differently. So I guess they're wondering, how are they able to communicate and define their business traction in a way that is effective to investors and can allow them to see success in fundraising?
I would say in terms of companies I've seen in the past, right? I usually try to, sorry about the wind, usually try to define traction by the most important KPIs for that individual. So if it's how many users you have on the platform, fantastic. If you're able to leverage that at a later stage, actually make sure it's a revenue driver, that's great. If you're looking at, like, say, pre-sales, that can be something big in terms of traction as well. As long as you're able to showcase that there is demand for the product, that's what I consider traction at the end of the day. And as long as that growth of the demand is like in a month or a quarter period where it's like, hey, look, in January was our first start, February is our new growth, and now we're in March and it's like doubled, I'm able to see that, yes, if you were to have additional funding in some way, it can kind of help you scale. And that's how I would usually look at traction, just personally.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment as well. And like, I have a background in digital marketing, and I think if anyone has marketing or sales background, you know very well, and mentioned KPIs. So what are the key performance indicators relative to the business? So if it's software, like how many subscribers do you have? If you're still building the prototype, like how many people are on your waiting list? And I think the time frame is important as well, because again, if you're thinking about venture as a funding pathway, VCs, they want to put fuel in the rocket ship, right? So they want to see something that's totally like exploding in growth. There's a huge demand. So part of that as the founder and your strategy of like, how are you going to, you better make your announcement, get your kind of first early pipeline, and then get the pipeline of users, or, and again, it's not, revenue isn't always important. It definitely helps, right? People are paying for you for your service, like that's huge. And so whether you can show significant amount of revenue or users, and to get into specific metrics, I will say at like pre-seed and seed, it's 10% week over week growth. That's something that's significant. Series A is a little farther along. It's like 20% month over month growth. Those are usually some like significant like metrics that will showcase, okay, this is traction. So as long as from the founder's perspective, you're tracking that, like how many people are signing up for your service or your product or whatever it may be, and showing that incremental percentage of growth. And then if it's not, being able to speak to that, like, oh, COVID, right? Supply chain or whatever, like highlighting that, like don't hide stuff under the rug, right? You want to show, you know what, we had a bug in our software, so we dipped, right? Like being completely transparent about some of these like hiccups, so to speak, but really like understanding like how you're, again, as the founder or CEO, and especially if you're the one raising capital, how are you driving your ship forward and, steering it in the right direction?
Yeah, building off of what Rachel said, I think traction is defined very differently based on industry, investor, like even investors, and what stage you are at. And oftentimes it is great to start friendly conversations with investors based on what you want to build towards, and just ask them for advice and ask them what kind of metrics do you want to see at the stage that you want to like get funding for, or what kind of stats do you want to see, and what kind of growth do you usually look for in companies that you actually invest in, and just kind of use those as metrics to where you want to build towards. But I think really at the end of the day, you as the entrepreneur and founder really know the industry and the market a lot better than we as the investors do. So I think it really is about the story that you tell and the demand that you show, as Audie was saying. So yeah, it really is more of a how much you want to fit in with that funding partner, and how that funding pathway is really the best for you at what stage you are at, and like the stage that like your prototype or your company is at too.
I'd like to add to that as well. And in terms of even after, let's go ahead and say you're speaking with that possible investor or partner, I would say updating them as you keep on growing is fantastic. So utilizing platforms like PaperStreet, if you are a software or hardware company, it would be great, where it just updates them. So it's like, hey, look, I can go ahead and check on the last time they sent me something from PaperStreet and see what their metrics are and how much they've grown. And that usually kind of changed the tune of an investor based upon like, hey, you may be too early, but all of a sudden 4 or 5 months later, they've seen that you've actually grown tremendously, and they may reach out to you and say, hey, yeah, actually, let's have that conversation about investments. So as Eileen said, it's not always wanting to jump in right away and say, hey, look, invest in me now, but it's like, let's build up a rapport. And then as you see my growth, they may just reach out naturally, wanting to invest or learn more.
Yeah, just kind of building off of what Audie said, feel free to ask investors to see if you want to ask them or add them to your investor, like your email newsletter. Like if they, like most of the time they won't say no, especially if you aren't fundraising now, like it's just more like friendly updates. So yeah, just feel free to like keep them in the loop and build that repertoire as you lead into when you do want to fundraise.
Yeah, I will say those are great. Even though I don't write the checks, right? I just kind of introduce people to write checks to. I still get a lot of investor updates from founders, and it's great to see their progress. I have to say most people are, rooting for founders. We want to see you guys build and do great things. And so showing that significant progress of, whether it's like, key milestones are also important too. Like, did you get FDA clearance? Right? Like all these other like pieces that are integral to the business, really like showcasing that you've kind of achieved these key milestones, and also showing the path forward of like where you still plan to grow, or like how are you, attracting a specific market, and then we're going to like a geography, and then how we're going to plan to attack each different market or geography and such. And so I think, as long as, I think, again, having that vision as an entrepreneur and being able to communicate that shows like thoughtfulness, and again, someone that I'd be willing to bet on for sure.
Oh, these are amazing tips. Thank you to all three of you. I love how we had kind of a natural flow of conversation there, building on top of each points. Just to summarize, because that was a lot of great info. Thank you, Addie, for bringing up KPIs and kind of communicating those key metrics, and Rachel even giving a few of the standard kind of metrics that are looked for in seed and pre-seed rounds. And Eileen also making a very good point about, investors not being the experts in every single industry, and you really needing to, as a founder, bring in that aspect of storytelling and being able to convey yourself and your mission. And then also having Addie and Eileen building on top of the fact that it's important to think about when you're talking to investors and communicating the way that having more funding will be able to take you to that next level, and showing them kind of extrapolating what your future could look like, keeping them updated on the progress you're making, whether you're in the fundraising stage or not. Yeah, this is awesome. I did want to do a few more questions, perhaps specifically one for each of the three of you. So before we transition into our breakout rooms, founders can really get a sense of who might be the best for them to talk to. I saw we got a good question here in the chat for you, Addie. D. Scott, I think, was the one to ask. He said, I was curious if you would share thoughts on fundraising with traditional crowdfunding before attempting equity crowdfunding, wondering if that's a common thing, or you have any other advice on like the difference and things like that.
Absolutely. So I would say if you're definitely consumer focused or have some consumers at the end of the day who want to purchase your product, going the traditional route of crowdfunding, either Kickstarter or Indiegogo, is a great way to see whether the product is valid, right? So see, like, get those individuals buying into it. From there, you can utilize that same list of individuals that actually bought the product to actually invest into your campaign. And so what we've seen is a lot of companies who go onto Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or raise their initial amount to actually prove revenue at the end of the day, or prove demand at the end of the day, turn back around and then contact those same individuals that have bought the product but yet to receive it and say, hey, look, do you want to actually invest into the company now? Since you've already bought into the product, do you want to invest into the company to make sure that you actually are going to receive your product at the end of the day? It's kind of putting them into a corner, but it kind of helps a lot when it comes to their campaign, because now not only are individuals bought into wanting your product, but they're bought into the company, and seeing as it keeps on growing, they're able to actually have equity associated with it, possibly one day have a return on it. So I usually, for most companies that are like CPG focused or product focused, I say go ahead and raise on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, test it out with those individuals, see whether you can get a large mailing list of folks to possibly contact when you're actually looking to raise capital, and that definitely helps in your initial stages of kind of getting past that initial 50 to 100K on Wefunder, to then start unlocking a lot of the back end stuff that we help promote. But yes, definitely do traditional first, and then kind of gear yourself towards equity round.
Yeah, just to echo that, those are great platforms, especially for consumer focused products or services. There's also Republic and Start Engine. Those other great platforms. And a lot of times if you launch on there, you get included in their newsletters and their social posts, and there's already a community kind of built in there. So people that are used to investing in that space. So you'll get that awareness there too, right? So that's, a good option to consider. I actually did digital marketing for a company called CrowdfundX. We literally did digital marketing campaigns for crowdfunding. Usually if you were raising typically like 100,000 plus. And so a lot of that, again, it's like having that digital marketing or marketing sort of vision of like, because once you launch, how are you going to do the updates and the product updates? And, so really kind of a little bit of pre-planning. So doing a bit of research, which platform is best, and then having a little bit of pre-planning for how you're going to launch your campaign, because it's still almost essentially like a marketing campaign in a way once you're on the platforms, right? Like whether similar to what we were talking about earlier, like investor updates or, product updates and such. And so kind of having all your ducks in a row, so to speak, when you decide to launch. So that way, when you go, you just schedule and kind of send it out, as opposed to, scrambling or trying to, like get things going initially. It's like have everything planned out before you launch.
That's great. Thank you. I love that analogy to kind of comparing it to like marketing and even like communications, like keeping that constant communication, doing your due diligence with the investors. And one last question, I'll have this be for Eileen, but obviously anyone feel free to jump in, is now that we've talked a lot about kind of bootstrapping and holding off on the dilutive capital as much as possible in the beginning, but thinking about for the companies joining us today who might be, you know, in the process of getting interested in VC and maybe even already have a few investors, wondering kind of like how do the companies transitioning into that like know when they're ready for VC, and what are kind of the best ways to spark those conversations with investors when you maybe don't have any in your network to begin with? Someone asked in the chat, like, should I send my pitch deck, or is that something you hold off on? You know, like where in that process do you make those connections and kind of naturally get into the space for that?
Sure, it's a very big question. But I think in terms of getting into VC, I think there's like two ways. It's like you can either get warm intros, which usually have a better success rate in terms of like getting face to face with the investors, or you can like meet them at events, networking events. Grid has a bunch of events where you can speak with panelists and or other investors. There's other ways to just network with them naturally, and I think those like natural serendipitous moments where you are able to explain your founder story and just explain more about what you're building is really what helps the investor really get sold on what you're building. Because I think we invest pre-seed seed, so we're very early. So we look a lot at the team and the founder backstory and the storytelling of component of what you're building. And I think that's really important in terms of just like figuring out whether you want to raise VC or whether you want to raise the next stage funding, just because obviously you need like some forms of traction, like show the demand, a large market opportunity, solid team, a clear business model. But I think like as a founder, you need clarity on what your goals are. And I think you are shopping as much for the investor as the investor is shopping for you, because I think you should not, I think like founders have really, really great ideas. So don't sell yourself short in that, because you do know what you're building, you know the market, you know the industry, and I think you are trying to convince the investor about why they should invest in you and also why you are mission aligned with them. And I think if you do find those mission aligned investors, it's really game changing, because the investors usually have a huge network of other investors, other like potential consumers, or like just like supply chain wise. So just a lot of networks that you can get access to and a lot of resources that you can get access to. So I think in terms of being ready for VC, I think it really depends on what your vision for what you're building is as the founder and how big and scalable that you want it to be. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. So, accelerators are great because they have like demo days and then investor networking events like Techstars, right? They have a day where you can demo and they bring investors in, and there's already a network there and there's branding. It's kind of like a stamp of approval, like, oh, well, if Techstars, invested in you, then must be a good company, right? So there's that way as well. I wanted this book by Brad Feld. It's called Venture Deals. It's like one of those kind of learning the language, right? Again, it's a whole different industry. So learning the language of understanding. Also this one, term sheets and valuations. So kind of, doing a little bit of homework and just kind of understanding the terminology. And again, people that have raised a lot of capital, their advice, Twitter's like just exploding with information, right? So it's easy to get lost in the rabbit hole, but I think understanding kind of the basics of it first and foremost, is really helpful. So that way, when you walk into these conversations and people start to say things like pre-money valuation, you're prepared, right? And again, it's a whole other world and language, but having a little bit of the understanding definitely will help. And, Eileen gave a lot of great like resource and advice as well. And our program that I oversee, the Venture Pipeline, we help make strategic warm intros to investors, because there's a little bit of a vetting process we go through, and that's what we look at, the traction and the pitch deck and such, kind of get the founders prepared, so that way when you do get the meetings, you have to think, once you do get that investor meeting, you'll maybe get a chance to pitch, and then they'll want to do due diligence and dive deeper in, and then ultimately write the check. And so having, again, like preparation, what is that quote where like luck, success is when luck and preparation and opportunity meet, or you guys know what I'm saying? But yeah, essentially. So yeah, so I'll pause there and then see what everyone else thinks.
I would say I echo everything you guys have said. One of the biggest things or differences is always making sure if you're walking into a room full of investors, usually individuals have a list of those investors who are attending, making sure that you're checking on the background of those investors, what kind of stages are they currently investing in, what kind of companies have they invested in, and if they've invested in a company similar to yours, most likely you have to stay away from them because it's just a conflict of interest, and so not wasting your time was one of the things. However, it could help where it's like they may know someone that's probably interested at your current stage that it's not associated with their VC firm. I'd say building a track record of being successful is key. So starting off early, where it's maybe the angels that you've worked with previously who've invested in your companies. Like I would say, okay, starting it from earlier from that, your friends and family around, making sure that you're able to like help them in the tracking of this, because the better you do for them, the more most likely that they have someone in their network that's a larger angel. So kind of making sure that you're in every single portion of your round, you're always keeping the communication open between the individuals who invested into you, because most likely they're going to go ahead and tell someone else about your company and see how successful it's been. You hit the angel group, make sure you're always like, open communication with them, tell them exactly what's going on with your business. The more chances you're showing them that you keep on winning, it's like that marketing effect where it's like you showcase you're winning, boom, somebody else is going to tell them about your story. You hit somebody else up, boom, another time they're telling you about your story. So for me, it's building up from the earliest stages of friends and family coming in to the angel space and showcasing that you're bringing returns for them, to the next portion of VCs and showing that you're able to go ahead and do this. It's all about a network effect at times, but it also turns into play with like marketing and making sure that you're putting your best foot forward and always being very transparent if you're doing bad as well, because you don't want to, basically just have a nice house on the outside but terrible on the inside. I don't know that quote, but it's something similar to that, right? It's like, but yeah, at the end of the day, you want to always showcase that, hey, look, I'm being fully transparent. I need help. Always ask for help when it's needed, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to help individuals feel more safe around investing into your company. And also in terms of like going into a meeting or going to a network effect, a networking event, just make sure that you know exactly who may be in attendance, and if they've invested in your space before, make sure that either you go and talk to them about your company, but see who they can probably connect you over to, just due to the fact that they may have a non-compete or something associated with that.
Yeah, and actually you mentioned something I wanted to bring up was like doing the research on the funds. That's huge. Like from the founder, that's your job. That's part of your job, is to do the research and see what type of firms would be interested in investing in your space, and so that's obviously like at the seed and, round. Earlier than that, I will say like Tech Coast Angels, for the, like you mentioned, angel syndicates, right? There's a lot of great different angel syndicates that you could pitch to, and you get a chance, you go in, and I think now it's all virtually, so you go in the Zoom room, you get to pitch, and they'll maybe ask some questions, and then they vote, and if they vote and they decide to write you a check, that's you get your kind of first initial like angel investment, and then from there a lot of the angels have connections that they can help introduce you to at the seed level. But I will say Crunchbase, I think honestly, investing in I think it's only like $20 a month or so, totally worth the investment, because you'll get a chance to look at the firms and then look at the companies they've invested in, how much they've invested, at what stages. It's so worth it. So if you're at that stage where you're looking at institutional seed round, highly recommend using Crunchbase to do your research.
Yeah, I second Crunchbase. It's great, not just in terms of investors, but also just seeing who else is building in the space that you're building in, and see if there's any parallels that you can draw from, and just building out your network in that way. But I also feel like pitch competitions, if you have the opportunity to engage with those have really great opportunities to not only network with investors, but also other entrepreneurs, and feel like entrepreneurs talk to each other and they can really recommend really great resources, investors, people to talk to, and also other accelerator programs. Grid 110 obviously has a huge multiple cohorts, and a track record, but there are also lots of other accelerators or incubators where you can really build out your network. And like even the people in this room, like if you exchange information with them, like they might have really great resources, or just also just help you like process your pain points and the challenges that you're facing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd even say I think there's a few accelerators that come to mind right away. Like Visible Hands is a great one, especially if you're looking to take off some time from work in order to build something. This could be a great way to test it with a couple of months sabbatical, and tapping into this as well in terms of alternative forms of financing, especially if you're looking to stay away from raising equity right away. You could look at other platforms that deal with revenue-based financing in terms of a product. So it's like if you have a monthly recurring revenue, or if you're selling like a product or something like that, and you have at least a few months of revenue, you can go to organizations like Clearco, Settle, or other organizations that are like Founder Path that help out with basically providing cash on hand that then ties back to your revenue, and you don't have to actually give up any equity whatsoever, but it's more favorable because it's based on your revenue and hitting a certain milestone before paying it back. So there's different outlets in terms of ways you can definitely raise capital and alternative forms of capital to help your company, not just.
I saw a question here in the chat about not-for-profit, and so it's different just because of the tax structure. So you'll need to kind of understand that as a tax entity, the business model for not-for-profit, but you have the opportunity to get grants. So that's where you can apply for grants. You can secure donors, right? So recurring donors and such. And so there's a lot of also great resources for how to fundraise in the not-for-profit world. But it is a little different in terms of what opportunities are available. There's also, I will mention that if you guys have heard of the B Corporation, you can be like a certified B Corp, which is like business for good in a way. So that's like another option. So there's a lot of, so I think kind of just understanding a little bit of like the business tax side will help you sort of determine the path forward.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you for speaking on that. And thank you to all of you for sending these great resources in the chat. I'll be sure to follow up in an email with some of these resources to everyone, as well as the recording to this event. As I've seen a lot are saying in the chat, this was super helpful. I love to hear that, and I've really enjoyed the conversation with the three of you today. Thank you for being here to speak on the panel. And I'm going to stop the recording so we can transition now into our breakout room portion.